Very light volumes. We're sitting at around 5.6 billion rand passing through the market. UK markets closed for a bank holiday, and overall we're just worried and nervous in terms of what happened yesterday in France and in Greece as well.
Yeah, I guess that just shows how big an influence the UK market is, or foreign investors.
From a volume perspective,
that's
obviously.
half the usual volumes, yes. Yes, there are a lot of concerns. It's a bit of a catch-22 because François Hollande isn't a great fan of austerity, and that's probably more market-friendly. But the biggest issue is whether all these agreements that were so difficult to come to between France and Germany and Mercosur and all that, that could fall through. And that's what's spooking markets at the moment. And there is some sort of substance behind that. But I do think what the EU does as a whole is a lot more important than what specific countries do, and how they manage the euro in general, and how the whole region does.
That's done by the big powers, and that would being France and Germany, and that's why there's this concern. But I mean, Merkel actually came out and said that she's not willing to renegotiate anything that was done previously.
The fact of the matter is, though, that everyone's interests are the same. France's best interests are Germany's best interests in the long term and for the whole of the EU, and they all know that. And it's also a sign that the French voters have actually put their foot down and gone against austerity and are unhappy with current management of their country. So it's the democracy taking place and shifting the way the people want things to be managed.
All right. So markets down in South Africa, markets down in Germany. We're seeing pressure coming through in the US and also in Asia today. So overall, red across the board, with a few exceptions, and top 40 behind us. What is your sense in terms of today's trade?
It was quite a choppy day. We started off well in the red, and then we started picking up. There was actually the French issued some bonds which came in better than expected and were well accepted by the market, which is a very important indicator for me, especially when you see how the market reacts to this kind of news. But we're going to, again, these kind of things do spook markets, and we're going to have this ongoing for a long time now, where we're going to have negative news coming in from Europe, and markets are going to be spooked, and it's something we're going to have to deal with in the going future.
So a few of the stocks that actually stick out, because there's not that much green on the board. Anglo Platinum, I'd like to touch on that. It's up 1.6% today, sitting at exactly 500 Rand. No real news coming through for Anglo Plat.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because you've got Billiton down 1% and all the resources.
And I mean, Lonmin just slightly flat, slightly to the positive, though, and no real other platinum miners performing that well. Yeah,
I mean, Impala's quite flat as well, so maybe it's got to do with the rand and the platinum price. And I haven't seen any news on Anglo, but there is a lot of moving parts with that one at the moment, and a lot of potential news coming out. Maybe something's got to do with that environmental study happening in Brazil with regards to that big iron ore asset. Maybe there's some news that we haven't actually seen yet. Often these things happen where the market knows before the rest of us,
Absolutely. Okay, so let's touch on some of the stuff that we do actually know. So we had Famous Brands, which was out with a trading update. Headline earnings per share expected to come through between 276 and 281 cents, which is an increase of around 16%. Are you blown away with these numbers? I mean, double-digit growth. They're looking good.
Famous Brands is one of those overachievers. Every sort of earnings update comes in and they've managed to grow earnings double-digit off what seems to be a higher base every time. I was actually talking to a few of my colleagues today and looked at the market cap of the company, and it's only 4 billion Rand. And I always thought it was bigger in my head, a bigger market cap, because it's so visible and you see all the franchises everywhere. But the fact is they are franchises. That's not doesn't fall under their assets. But a fantastic business. I still think there's a long way to go.
But they're just acquiring and acquiring the last few years. That's all we hear.
Their brand mix is great. And you have a look at the bigger scheme. You look at McDonald's of the world and Yum Brands, and you see how well they've been doing, especially in the developing markets. And I think that's where, obviously Famous Brand, mainly South Africa and potential Africa exposure, the developing markets, growing middle class incomes is going to really push their growth going forward, because everyone loves fast food. It's convenient, it's affordable, it's not necessarily healthy, but it's a great way to, a lot of, when you enter the middle class, it's the kind of thing that you would do a lot more often.
Absolutely. Okay, so now I know that you hold the stock, so would you buy even at these levels then, Byron?
Yes,
I know that it's difficult to get in and out. It's liquid, but not liquid enough, many investors say.
Yes, it's not the most liquid, but if you're a long-term investor, then if you're a bit patient on the day in buying the shares, then it should be fine. At 20 times earnings, they do look fairly expensive, but they always look expensive because they always bring these kind of earnings in. And like I said, I still think the growth potential is massive. The Wimpeys and the Steers and so on, they're fantastic brands, and you take that up into Africa, and that starts getting engraved in the psyche and in the likes of Nigeria and so on. There's huge potential. Absolutely. Obviously, the infrastructure and all that is another issue that they have to deal with, but their supply chain has also been managed very, very well.
Esau Frankie, and I saw this story and I thought, great, finally we're starting to see a turnaround happening in the construction industry. We've been waiting for such a long time. Full year headline earnings per share expected to increase by as much as 151%. So swinging from a loss to a profit. It's off a low base, but these are the first signs that we're starting to see growth coming through. And this is not the only construction company that is coming out with some positive numbers. We're starting to see it trickling through all the numbers as well, through all the companies. Yes,
and very interesting. Esau Frankie are very much involved in the foundations and the pipeline of buildings. So they're the first ones to be contracted.
The geotechnical sort of side of things as well.
Yes, so they were the first ones to be contracted and the first ones to be paid. So when the construction sector starts picking up, you'll see that filtering through into the Esau Franco earnings before everyone else. So it's a great indicator to show that the market is actually turning. So it is to be expected if the market was to be turning, Esau Frankie to come out with these kind of numbers. So it's great to see as a proxy for the rest of the market or construction sector.
Okay, MTN also out with some interesting numbers last week. In Iran, we're starting to see market share increasing, customer base increasing. We're looking at some good numbers here.
It's their second biggest subscriber base. You do have to realize that they only own 49% of the company. So I think their subscriber base there is around 31 million, but their actual exposure is half of that because they only own 49% of Irancell. I'm saying that because there's a lot of risk there at the moment. I am quite worried about the potential sanctions that are going to be implemented by the US. Not necessarily the pending court case with Turkcell. I don't think that's going to be too much of an issue. I do think the sanctions will be. But subscribers in general, it's great to see that growth coming through. Everyone called it X growth, but I still think there's so much potential. MTN are massive in developing markets off low bases, and I'm not just talking about subscribers. I'm talking about potential ARPUs. We did see the ARPUs coming down, and that's to be expected. A lot of the new subscribers. But we're looking at
volume here at the end of the day and data as well.
Yes, exactly. And I think in the long term, we're going to see ARPU start picking up, just because the economies that they're involved in are still growing very fast, and that's going to filter through to the consumer.
You're not worried about Turkcell?
I don't think so. I don't think that the US actually have the jurisdiction to hear the case. So I think this is going to be dragged out for years and years, and I really don't think that there's an issue there. There might be some substance to it, but I don't think they're going to be able to get the monetary fine that they're looking for.
Looking at other companies that actually posted some gains today, Vodacom was in positive territory. MTN didn't manage to post a gain. We had Steinhoff at the top of the top 40, up just over 2%. So pretty much a mixed bag. And again, we're just seeing a big shift towards the industrial sector, Byron.
Yeah, that's interesting because Steinhoff have massive exposure to France. With the Conforama. So maybe that had to do with the bonds that went off better than expected, and a lot of negativity there originally.
Movement to growth as opposed to austerity.
Yeah, it's quite ironic.
That's quite clever.
But MTN was up a lot on Friday, so maybe that's why they're not up as much as what you see Vodacom doing today.
Absolutely. Okay, I'd also like to touch on Tiger Brands, because Tiger Brands, perhaps in talks with Dangote Flour, this is quite an interesting move, and I mean this Nigerian consumer story is a very good one and very positive one. Do you think something could transpire there?
Yes, everyone's after that Nigerian market. 170 odd million people is massive. Tiger Brands have always said in their strategy that they're going to work on moving up and improving their exposure to Africa, which they already have quite large exposure already. So that makes a lot of sense. Getting into the Nigerian market already by buying into a company instead of going in on your own. It's very difficult to go in on your own in Africa. It seems seems you need certain connections and infrastructure will already be implemented, which is very difficult to start off with. So going in via acquisition seems like a good way to do it, and grasping that Nigerian...
you don't own Tiger Brands though? We
do. We do have for quite a few clients, especially for clients looking for good dividends. They pay a good dividend and they're a very stable growth company.